Did you know that procrastination affects over 20% of people regularly? That's right, millions of us struggle to get things done, even when we know it's important. In fact, procrastination isn't just a bad habit, it's a huge productivity killer. Studies show that it can cost you up to 55 days of wasted time each year. Think about that. What could you achieve if you didn't put things off? You might think procrastination is all about being lazy or unmotivated. But it's much deeper than that. It's actually about what's happening inside your brain. And if you understand what's going on, you can finally take control. In this video, we're going to uncover the real reasons you procrastinate, things most people don't even know. You'll learn how to stop waiting for motivation, why too many choices can leave you stuck, and how to rewire your brain to make progress automatic. Get ready to discover surprising strategies that will help you stop putting things off for good and start achieving your goals. Stay tuned, it's time to end procrastination for good. Chapter 1. The Hidden Saboteur. Unmasking your inner resistance. Procrastination often feels like a simple matter of laziness, but there's usually more to it. We all have an inner saboteur, our mind's way of resisting change, growth, or even success. This resistance can take many forms: fear of failure, fear of success, perfectionism, or simply not feeling good enough. Understanding these hidden barriers can help you beat procrastination once and for all. Psychologist Steven Pressfield calls this resistance the enemy in his book The War of Art. He writes, "Resistance will tell you anything to keep you from doing your work." And it's true. Your inner resistance can convince you that your goals are too big, too risky, or just not worth it. This internal voice makes you procrastinate, even when you know what you should be doing. But why does this happen? Neuroscience has an answer. Our brains are wired to avoid discomfort, which is why we often procrastinate when faced with tasks that feel overwhelming. According to a study in the Journal of Neuroscience, tasks that feel uncertain or challenging trigger the brain's stress response. This leads to avoidance behaviors, such as procrastination, to protect ourselves from that discomfort. The key to overcoming this resistance is recognizing it for what it is, a mental block. Instead of listening to your inner saboteur, take small steps. Start with tasks that feel less daunting, and gradually build momentum. Pressfield offers another powerful piece of advice: the most important thing is to begin. Start small, and you'll often find that the larger task becomes more manageable. Chapter 2. The Paradox of Too Many Choices. Why freedom feels overwhelming. We often believe that having more choices leads to more freedom. But when it comes to procrastination, too many options can paralyze us. This is known as the paradox of choice. Psychologist Barry Schwartz explains in his book The Paradox of Choice that when people are faced with too many options, they become anxious, stressed, and less satisfied with their decisions. Instead of making us happy, more choices can actually make us feel stuck. Consider this. When you walk into a supermarket and see 100 different types of cereal, it's easy to become overwhelmed. You might even walk out empty-handed, unable to choose. The same thing happens with tasks. When you have too many options on your to-do list, the brain can freeze up. It doesn't know where to start, and as a result, it avoids the entire list. In fact, research shows that people who have fewer options are more likely to follow through. A study published in Psychological Science found that people who had fewer choices were more satisfied and more likely to take action. Limiting your options can reduce stress and improve your decision-making process. One strategy to combat this is to simplify your choices. Instead of looking at your to-do list as a giant mountain of tasks, narrow it down to just 3 things you want to accomplish today. This makes it easier to take action without feeling overwhelmed. If you're stuck choosing between different tasks, ask yourself, which of these will have the biggest impact today? Focus on that task and let go of the others for now. The key here is recognizing that too many options can create mental clutter, which feeds procrastination. By narrowing your focus, you can make quicker, more confident decisions, and get to work faster. Chapter 3. Neuroscience of Delay. What's really happening in your brain? If you've ever wondered why procrastination feels so hard to overcome, the answer lies in your brain. Procrastination isn't just about willpower, it's deeply rooted in how our brain functions. When you procrastinate, your brain is often in conflict. On one side, your prefrontal cortex is in charge of logic, planning, and decision-making. On the other side, your limbic system, the part of the brain responsible for emotions, wants to avoid discomfort, like stress or fear. Neuroscientist Dr. Piers Steel, in his book The Procrastination Equation, explains that procrastination is a result of this battle between the logical and emotional parts of the brain. When tasks feel unpleasant or stressful, your limbic system wins, and you delay them. But when tasks are fun or rewarding, the prefrontal cortex takes charge, and you're more likely to get started. Interestingly, procrastination has an evolutionary explanation. According to a study in the Journal of Personality and Social Psychology, procrastination may have once been a survival mechanism. When faced with an immediate threat, such as a predator, our ancestors needed to prioritize their survival over tasks that weren't urgent. Today, our brains still operate in this way, even though the threats are often deadlines or work-related pressure. One way to hack your brain's procrastination response is by lowering the stakes. If a task feels too big or overwhelming, break it down into smaller, more manageable steps. When you complete each small step, your brain rewards you with a burst of dopamine, making the next step easier. This positive reinforcement helps shift the balance toward action, rather than avoidance. Another strategy is to reduce the emotional impact of tasks. If a task feels like a mountain, start by doing just a few minutes of it. Research from the Harvard Business Review shows that starting a task is often the hardest part, but once you begin, it becomes easier to keep going. By making the initial step feel smaller and less daunting, you can bypass your brain's resistance and get into the flow of work. Understanding the neuroscience behind procrastination can empower you to take action. By recognizing the brain's emotional triggers and using strategies to short-circuit them, you can train your brain to stop delaying and start doing. If you're finding these strategies helpful, don't forget to subscribe for more tips on how to defeat procrastination for good. Chapter 4. The Motivation Myth. Why waiting for inspiration is your biggest mistake. You've probably heard it before. Just wait until you're feeling motivated. But here's the truth. Waiting for motivation is a strategy that rarely works. Motivation doesn't just appear when you need it, it's something you have to create through action. In his book Atomic Habits, James Clear argues that you do not rise to the level of your goals. You fall to the level of your systems. In other words, motivation isn't magic, it's a result of building consistent habits. The research backs this up. A study from the Journal of Consumer Research found that people who waited for motivation to strike were more likely to procrastinate and less likely to achieve their goals. Instead of waiting for a feeling, you should build small, easy-to-do habits that create momentum. For example, if you want to start writing, don't wait for inspiration. Commit to writing just 200 words a day. It's not about doing everything in one sitting but about getting started and building the habit. The 2-minute rule is another effective strategy. This rule, also popularized by James Clear, states that if a task takes less than 2 minutes, just do it. It's about making the first step ridiculously easy. For instance, if you want to start exercising, don't aim for an hour-long workout. Instead, promise yourself you'll do just 2 minutes of exercise. Once you start, you're likely to keep going. This approach takes advantage of the brain's natural tendency to stick with tasks that seem small and manageable. By focusing on small actions, you can gradually build motivation and stop waiting for it to appear out of nowhere. Research from the University of Scranton found that people who set small, specific goals were 10 times more likely to succeed in achieving them. So, the next time you feel tempted to wait for motivation, remember, just take action. Motivation will follow. If you're enjoying this content, be sure to hit the subscribe button for more insights that will help you overcome procrastination. Chapter 5. The Ego Trap. How perfectionism keeps you stuck in limbo. Perfectionism is one of the sneakiest forms of procrastination. You might tell yourself, I'll start once I know everything is perfect, or I can't begin until I have the perfect plan. But here's the reality. Perfectionism is a major productivity killer. It keeps you stuck in an endless cycle of planning and overthinking, never actually moving forward. Psychologist Dr. Ellen Hendrickson, in her book How to Be Yourself, explains that perfectionism often arises from the fear of making mistakes. We think that if we do things perfectly, we'll avoid criticism, judgment, or failure. However, Research from psychological science shows that perfectionism actually leads to higher stress and lower performance. People who aim for perfection are less likely to complete tasks, as they're constantly tweaking and revising rather than finishing. So, how do you break free from the ego trap of perfectionism? The key is to embrace imperfection. Instead of aiming for flawless execution, focus on progress over perfection. As author Anne Lamott says in Bird by Bird, perfectionism is the voice of the oppressor. The best way to combat perfectionism is to take action and make mistakes. Mistakes are part of the learning process, and the more you fail, the more you learn. One effective way to challenge your perfectionism is to set good enough goals. For example, instead of aiming to write the perfect article, aim to write a draft that's 80% complete. By giving yourself permission to be imperfect, you'll reduce the fear of failure and free yourself from the cycle of procrastination. Remember, the goal isn't perfection, it's progress. Chapter 6. Rewiring Your Habits, the science-backed technique to stop procrastination forever. Want to stop procrastinating once and for all? It's time to rewire your habits. The key to overcoming procrastination lies not in willpower, but in changing your brain's default responses. Neuroscience has shown that habits are formed through repeated behaviors that trigger automatic responses in the brain. The more you repeat a task, the easier it becomes. So, how can you train your brain to stop procrastinating and build productive habits? The first step is to create a clear cue for your new habit. In The Power of Habit, Charles Duhigg explains that every habit is made up of three parts: the cue, the routine, and the reward. For example, let's say you want to start reading every day. Your cue might be finishing your lunch, the trigger. The routine is reading for 15 minutes, and the reward is the satisfaction of completing a chapter. Over time, your brain begins to associate this routine with the reward, making it easier to follow through. Another powerful strategy is temptation bundling, as described by behavioral scientist Catherine Milkman. The idea is simple: pair a task you don't enjoy with something you love. For instance, only allow yourself to watch your favorite show while exercising. This makes the task more enjoyable and reduces your resistance to doing it. Habit stacking is also an effective technique for rewiring your brain. As discussed earlier, this strategy involves linking a new habit to an existing one. If you already have a solid morning routine, use it as a foundation to add new habits. For example, after you brush your teeth, take a few minutes to meditate or plan your day. By stacking new behaviors on top of old ones, you make it easier to stay consistent and avoid procrastination. Research from Duke University shows that nearly 45% of our daily actions are habits, not decisions. By focusing on creating positive habits, you can make productivity automatic, rather than something you have to force yourself to do. The key is to start small, be consistent, and gradually build on your successes. Rewiring your habits is the ultimate way to defeat procrastination for good. Don't forget to subscribe for more tips on rewiring your habits and conquering procrastination.